Heyo YouTube friends, it's Bam, welcome back to my channel. TBC has finally dropped on the file server of Ascension. Many new features, new skills, new world forged REs, new raids even. I can't wait to play TBC right now. And I can't wait to make videos about it either, and this is gonna be my first one. It's a general guide for drafting. And it's not gonna be a leveling guide, but specifically for picking skills and drafting abilities on the Thrall server. Now the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I read comments that people need 10 to 20 prestiges to hit their build, or they need 1,000,000 marks of Ascension. And while it's true sometimes that you can get really unlucky and just don't hit anything, I think with some proper planning and proper strategy you can actually hit your build way faster and don't have to prestige that often. That is why I collected 5 tips and tricks on how to make your draft more efficient. Quick disclaimer at the start, in the end it all comes down to luck while drafting. You can make a good plan, you can have a good strategy for drafting, and no matter if you have a complicated build or a very easy build, if you are unlucky, you might just not hit what you need, and that's just how things go. My tips might still help you in the end in order to cut down the number of total prestiges that you need in order to hit your build. With that said, let's get right into it with tip number 1. Tip number 1 is get your golden skill cards. And I know this is super obvious, but I mean it. If you're new to the server, new on Thrall, invest all the gold that you are farming into golden skill cards if you want to hit specific builds. Don't underestimate it, it's really important, it saves you a lot of frustration and it's really the key in order to hit a lot of builds. At the start of the season I actually invested all the gold that I farmed up into golden skill cards before I bought anything else, in order to have a nice pool of cards that I can use to then roll builds later on. Building up on tip number 1, choosing the right skill cards. For that I recommend highly you plan out how your build is supposed to look, what skills you need and what skills are nice to have for your build, especially rare and epic skills. Maybe you're following an already existing build from the builder so you know what build abilities you need, and if not, if you're doing your own stuff, I highly recommend make a list beforehand and figure out what epics and rares you need. My strategy for skill cards then looks as follows. I will look whether or not I need more rare abilities for my build or epic abilities. If I need more rare abilities, I will try and get as many of them in my skill cards as possible. Same for epic abilities. If I am having a build that needs a lot of epic abilities, I will try and get as much of them in my skill cards as I can. For that I have an example for you here. This is a picture of a build that I made recently. It's a melee Righteous Flames build and I knew I was gonna need a lot of rare abilities for this one. I think ideally it was 9 rare abilities, so I figured I was gonna throw as much rares as I can into my skill cards, and you can see that here. This build specifically did not need much epic abilities, so I decided to throw them all into my lucky skill cards. The reason behind this strategy is because it gets exponentially harder to hit specific rarities of builds the more you have of that rarity already. Meaning if I would just put all the epic abilities into my skill cards and I am trying to hit 9 rare abilities by just rolling them or even with lucky cards, it's not gonna happen. So this is why I went with this kind of strategy. And you can also turn this around. If you're having trouble hitting epics, if you need a lot of epic abilities, you just do it the other way around and put as much epic abilities as you can into your skill cards. Like for example for a Gurubashi Berserker build. Tip number 3 is choosing the right starting abilities, and this goes hand in hand with your skill cards and the plan that you made for your build. There's 2 things to consider here. First of all, you might want to take masteries. Masteries increase the chance of hitting abilities that are within those masteries. So for example, if you're trying to hit Aspect of the Beast, it might be a good idea to take the Hunter Aspect Mastery at level 1 in order to increase your chances of hitting Aspect of the Beast. The second thing to consider when it comes to starting abilities is you might not want to take any common abilities, or at least not much, because there's a lot of good stuff that you can take at level 1, like charge, rare abilities, even epic abilities are there that could be very important for your build. And common abilities are usually easier to hit than those rare abilities. Instead of using common abilities from level 1, you might choose to take one of the lesser enchants, the lesser epic enchants that give you a specific starter ability, like for example lesser arcane explosion or lesser healing touch if you're a healer, or you might want to go with Soul of the Warden, Fan of Knives, like I do in the video footage behind. That way you can take more good abilities at level 1 and then you try to hit the common abilities while leveling. Tip number 4, and this is gonna be the most complicated one and also the most important one. Keep your draft pool clean. But what does that actually mean? In short, it means you want to avoid adding abilities to your draft pool, and you do that by taking requirements for those abilities. Here's an example. The most prime example for requirements is demons. Everybody knows that you need a soul shard generator in order to roll a demon. Otherwise you won't see it in your draft pool at all. Another example for this are abilities like Holy Shield and Shield Wall. If you don't have defensive stance, you can't roll those abilities. And the list goes on and on and on. There's a lot of abilities like that that require a different spell for you to actually see them in your draft. And this is true for all of abilities that have a written requirement in the text, like in the example here. But there's also a lot of abilities that don't have a written requirement, but you still have to meet a certain requirement in order to hit them. Let me give you an example, because here it gets really complicated. Let's look at Presence of Mind here. Presence of Mind says that it makes your next mage spell instant. Now it does not have a written requirement on top, but as a matter of fact, you actually need a mage spell with a cast time in order to be able to roll Presence of Mind. That also means if you don't want Presence of Mind in your draft pool, just simply avoid taking mage spells and you won't see it, and instead see other epic abilities that might be better for you. Same goes for stuff like Natural Alacrity and Natural Swiftness, which are basically the same effect. The second example for this that I have is Readiness. Same here, Readiness does not actually have a written requirement on top. But yet still you can't roll Readiness if you don't have a hunter spell with a cooldown. Which makes sense of course, because otherwise it would be useless. But it also means if you take a hunter spell with a cooldown, even though you don't really need it for your build, you open up your draft pool and add this to it. The list of those kind of abilities sadly is pretty long and I can't cover all of them. There is things like Divine Favor, Inner Focus, Combustion, Cold Snap. All of those abilities require certain spells before they are enabled in your draft. So in practice that means if you avoid those kind of requirement spells, your draft pool will be smaller and therefore the chances of rolling abilities that are important for you are higher. Tip number 5, don't take abilities that you don't need. And this is specifically true for legendary abilities. If you have a build that needs a specific legendary, like for example Moonkin or Metamorphosis, then you're better off not taking any legendary until you get the one you need. Of course, you might end up without any legendary at all and you have to prestige again. That's how things go, but in my personal experience it is better to stay away from legendary abilities until you got the one you need. Some people like to take one and hope for a card swap. In my personal experience I think this is not worth it, but in the end this is up to you. It comes with a risk either way. So take this one with a bit of caution. With that, we are at the end of this small guide about drafting. I'm well aware there might be more to it, there might be more cool tricks that you can do to influence the outcome of your draft. but I think this is already a pretty good start to make prestiging a little bit more bearable, or just so you don't have to prestige as much as before. So thank you very much for watching until this point. Keep an eye out for my next videos. The next ones are definitely gonna be build showcases again, so hit the subscribe button if you don't wanna miss out on this one. Other than that, peace out and thank you for watching. My tips might still help you though in order to cut down the number of prestiges that you need. My tips might Alter. My tips fuck off, yeah.